Fossil Pokemon, one of my favorite categories of Pokemon, have had an interesting past. By the end of Generation 8, I'd say we had a pretty good mix of new Pokemon and methods of obtaining the old ones. But at the present moment, they are completely absent from Scarlet and Violet. Now, not every generation introduced a set of new fossil Pokemon. The outliers were generations 2 and 7, but they at least had the previous generation's fossil Pokemon appear in the National Pokédex. So I think you can see what I'm saying here. Scarlet and Violet are the first Pokemon games to both have no brand new fossil Pokemon and no ways of obtaining the previous ones in the post-game, as the concept of the National Pokédex is no longer a part of the base games. Fossil Pokemon have always had it kind of rough because of their core concept. Being prehistoric creatures, they can be found in the form of fossil items, and when taken to the proper facilities, can be revived into a living, breathing Pokemon. This worked fine for the first games and was even a sneaky way to encourage trading with others to complete the Pokédex. But as the games went on and on, it started becoming a logistical nightmare. The whole idea of having Pokemon being revived from items is pretty cool, and it works thematically as world building. There used to be Pokemon unlike what we see in modern times, and the power of science fiction technology can bring them back for a select few trainers who are able to dig them up or otherwise acquire the fossils. However, the more of these you introduce, the more complicated it makes things. Overall, I think Generation 8 handled things pretty well, especially with Sword and Shield containing the most fossil Pokemon out of any games. No longer was there a need for the fossil items of the previous games, because now these Pokemon can be encountered in the wild of the Crown Tundra. What matters most is that the Crown Tundra is an area secluded from the rest of the world, with many other Pokemon hidden away for years, as well as underground caverns filled with their own forms of space-time distortion. The debut fossil Pokemon of Galar did need to be revived from fossils because the whole idea of mixing and matching was a gimmick. And in the end, I think this was the right choice. Any new Pokemon are tied to the items, while the old ones can be found in a designated area for the sake of convenience, as long as that area is appropriate. I'll never forget that they teased the idea of a Jurassic Park reference in Sun and Moon and never followed up on that. But even then, these fossil Pokemon that have been around for years are just canonically making a comeback in the wild. Sword and Shield's Pokédex entries for Ammonite and Kabutops mention how after being revived from fossils, many have either escaped into the wild or have been released, causing the population to grow. Kind of similar to how older entries for Lapras would say that it was an endangered species, while more modern ones say that their population has increased. And I think that's pretty neat because it serves as the basis for bringing these Pokemon into the wild rather than having you obtain them through reviving fossils like before. So with all of that in mind, where does it leave Scarlet and Violet? Nowhere. See, Scarlet and Violet are pretty interesting. For one thing, the ideas of past and future are at the forefront of the games, but these are split up, with Scarlet being the past and Violet being the future. There is a straight-up time machine that allegedly brings Pokemon from the past or future into the modern day. While it would seem like a no-brainer to just put the fossil Pokemon into Area 0, it would really only work for Scarlet, and I don't think that these should be version exclusive. But other than that, Paldea is a pretty big region, and there are secluded areas where certain Pokemon can be found that needed specific methods to obtain in the previous games, like Spiritomb. Maybe this would have been an opportunity to fully reincorporate all fossil Pokemon into the wild. Or maybe Game Freak is keeping the thematics intact by having them in a specific themed location. After all, the Crown Tundra was a part of Sword and Shield's DLC, so maybe the Indigo Disc DLC for Scarlet and Violet would make the most sense to bring back these fossil Pokemon. In the trailer, we do get a brief glimpse at landscapes that are being monitored, and among the Pokemon represented on the screen, there is a Mamoswine, which is a type of ancient Pokemon. Most of all, I think that the concept of fossil Pokemon just wasn't included in the base game of Scarlet and Violet because the main story revolves around the Paradox Pokemon. Whether or not these Pokemon are definitively from a different time period or exist as their own paradox, the fact is that most of their designs take cues from prehistoric animals. They stuck a dinosaur tail on a giant moth and called it a day. Though let's not miss an opportunity to shout out the best Pokemon of the games, Walking Wake, one of my favorite dinosaur Pokemon designs. These paradox Pokemon aren't really meant to replace fossils, neither in the concept or thematic niche. Again, their version exclusivity holds them back a bit. But I think it's clear a major reason there were no brand new fossil Pokemon introduced in this game was because they were close enough. Though I will say that I love the past Paradox Pokemon, even more so since the reveal of Walking Wake, because it really made me realize there's absolutely no way these are meant to be direct ancestors to modern Pokemon, but are instead literal paradoxes as their names imply. And because of this, not everyone needs to adhere to the prehistoric Pokemon idea. While some look like dinosaurs or even cave people, we also get Sandy Shocks, which is much more of an ancient alien, or Fluttermane, which does its own thing entirely. All that said, I am starting to miss more traditional fossil Pokemon. I did love the goofy abominations of the the Galar region, but when you realize that the last Pokemon to adhere to the traditional idea of fossil Pokemon were back in X and Y, it puts everything into perspective. That was 10 years ago. It's gotten to the point where fan designs for brand new fossil Pokemon are technically inaccurate because they just aren't like that anymore. So after the semi-annual check-in on fossil Pokemon, what are my suggestions? Well, first of all, Scarlet and Violet has time to turn things around with the DLC. I'm assuming it'll be pretty similar to the Sword and Shield expansion pass, so I'll wait patiently before passing full judgment. I don't really expect all fossil Pokemon to return, but maybe Generation 5 and 6 would be the ideal candidates, because they've been utilized the least when it comes to remakes and more recent Pokemon. Second, I hope that when we inevitably get Generation 10 in like 5 years, there are brand new fossil Pokemon that focus on some prehistoric species that have yet to be made into Pokemon. Like I said, I love if the new Pokemon were relegated to being revived through fossils as they were more recently discovered, and then just have an area for other prehistoric Pokemon to live where they can be caught. Game Freak, just go ahead and make the big Jurassic Park reference that you've been dreaming of. Third, while I love fossil Pokemon, we don't really need to rely on them for everything. I'm all for trying something new like the Paradoxes, or even just using a cool design and a regular Pokemon. We nearly got a Spinosaurus with Arctobax before it just evolved into Godzilla. So let me know what you think about how things are going for fossil Pokemon so far in Generation 9. What would you like to see change, and do you have any predictions for the future? Drop a comment down below. Also, which fossil Pokemon is your favorite? Anyway, I've got to go get things ready just in case we get an influx of ancient Pokemon later this year. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, especially the Great Gators, Brandon Mork, Cheeseburger Lasers, Gavnuts, Green Topaz 213, Justin R, Cosmo Zero, Largos, Michaela, Mochizuki Yoru, Nomad Nobi, Quago, Taijirai, Volity, and Pastel Blood. If you would like to support, get a shout out here as well as access to emotes for comments and live streams, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter as well for more memes, but anyway, this has been GatorX. I'll catch you all later.
Run for your lives! They are coming! See mountains come to life. Hear the rumble of a hungry Snorlax. Feel the heat of the Charizard.
Huh?
It's the attack of the giant Pokemon, and it's coming your way!
It's gaining on us!
The attack of the giant Pokemon Week continues today at 4 on Kids WB.